what is it about short pitch bowling that Indian batsmen can never counter convincingly and successfully?
Yeah, I think this problem with bouncers and short pitch deliveries, it seems like this infection that India gets every time they go overseas, especially to places like England, South Africa, West Indies in the past. And now, surprisingly, England, the second time I think that's happened. The last time was the World T20 again, where the bounce created a few problems for us. The thing about getting out to bouncers is a little different from getting out to any other delivery. So I don't think some people say that you have weakness outside the off stump or to a ball coming back in, and you have a weakness against the bouncer, so it's not too different. But I beg to differ there, because when you get out to a bouncer, or when you have two or three batsmen in one team getting out to bouncers, there is a certain amount of humiliation for a batsman. It's slightly embarrassing. It's like a boxer hitting somebody and you sort of fending it off. It's like you have been pummeled into submission. So I think morally it affects the team a lot more than having three of your batsmen playing outside the off stump. So that's, I think, another factor in our last defeat, that you had three batsmen in the top six who had problems against the bouncer, and that gives the opposition tremendous confidence.
So, do you think the deficiencies are like, is it a lack of technique or a proper technique facing the bouncer, separate to fear?
Well, actually, I'm a good guy to talk about this, because there was a time, and I played a lot of bouncers during my time, because West Indies, Australia, South Africa, and there was no one bouncer rule and all that. So yes, I had two distinct phases in my career. One phase was when I was playing the bouncer really well, and there was a phase towards the end of my career when I wasn't playing it too well. So I knew what was going right when I was playing well and what wasn't. In fact, in my very first test match, I was hit by a bouncer on my left. I got stitches and everything, and I retired hurt. But mentally, I had to overcome that problem very early in my career. So the first thing that I did when my injury healed is I played against the same opposition, which was West Indies, at home in a side game. So it was very important for me to go back and face the same bowlers. There is a slight mental issue. There were people who told me that it could have a psychological effect on you. But I had good people guiding me. And I also felt the best way to overcome this issue, mental or maybe technical as well, is face the same kind of challenge out there in the middle. And I'm glad I did that, because then I was able to face the same bowler. I found my way of getting out of it. I made sure that it wasn't a psychological scar on me, and I managed for a long time. So I think that is one important lesson. We can spend hours in the academy, and it's very easy for coaches to say, this is what you're doing wrong, this is what you should do. But it's very easy to see what the problems are. But the mental issue or fear or worried about the short pitch delivery can only go if you go back in the middle out there and face bouncers. If not from the same bowlers, at least similar kind of bowlers, because that's the only way you'll overcome the mental issue. Technical is a different matter. Now I'll tell you examples of batsmen who I thought had technical issues with the bouncer, but they managed. Steve Waugh, great batsman, but clearly short pitch wasn't one of his strengths. And I thought after a while he decided that the one thing that he was going to do is not get his gloves up to protect himself, because that is a human instinct. When you're scared or worried about the ball hitting you, this is what you do. It is something that has been given to us as a survival instinct. I think Steve Waugh drilled it into himself that come what may, he's not going to get the gloves up, and he would take the ball on his body. So many occasions you would see somebody bouncing him, and if he got into an awkward position, he would make sure to get the ball on his chest. Mohammad Azharuddin also had a technical problem. I don't think there was fear again, but he wasn't as good as Steve Waugh. He would sort of, sometimes the gloves would come in, but he also would try and ride on top of the bounce, which is what Yuvraj Singh also did in that last test, where he was trying to get on top of the bounce, feet in the air. Now that also, if you look at logic, the basic of cricket as a batsman, what are you doing there as a batsman? You're protecting the ball from hitting the stumps. That's the basic of the bat and ball game. So when there's a ball that's going to miss the stumps by a good many meters, logic will defy what Yuvraj Singh was doing. Is why then you want to defend a ball that's not anyway going to hit the stumps. And maybe that's a good starting point. So one of the things that Sachin Tendulkar does well is he doesn't want to play those balls. He's not looking to play the pull shot. So either he ducks into it or looks to leave it, because that ball is not going to hit the stump. Perhaps Yuvraj could start thinking of that. Why was he looking to play a ball that wasn't going to get him out? It's going to miss the stumps. One advice that I got very early from Jeffrey Dujon, who played for West Indies, he was watching behind the stumps. He told me one of the things you should never do is get on your toes or in the air to play the short pitch delivery. His theory was, once you got on your toes or in the air, you're not balanced. When you're firmly on the ground, you're nicely balanced, your head is steady, and then you're able to look at the ball properly and leave it. So that was a good advice that I got from Dujon.
Rahul Dravid is another good example, a fine example. Could you talk about Dravid's batting? I mean, you've seen him from younger days, and has he been the same against the short pitch delivery? Because he seems to be the best equipped batsman against the bouncers.
See, I'm not picking Dravid as an example here, because Dravid has always been very good against the bouncer, to the extent that he was one of the first batsmen who would actually pull a fast bowler on good lively pitches. He would play the pull shot. Lakshman is also the same. So these are guys who have no issues with the bouncer. But there are a few other batsmen. I think Sehwag has a slight issue with the bouncer, and he has learned a way to handle it. So guys who have an issue with the bouncer are the people to look at as to how they look to counter it. Suresh Raina, I think, worries me, because one of the things that he does, which is the worst thing that can happen to you as a batsman when you're facing the bouncer, is if you look at Suresh Raina, he's going back like this. The weight is not forward. So it shows a sense of fear, discomfort, and once you have that weight going backwards as a batsman, there's nothing you can do. You cannot play anything well if your weight is sort of going back. So the good example again is between two boxers. Even when a boxer is defending, he's looking to stay, the weight is forward. Once you start going like this, that means you're almost leaving yourself open to be dismissed or to be dominated. Now what can you tell a Suresh Raina? How do you overcome that? Again, I think if it's a mental issue, the only way he can do well for himself is go out there in the middle, find out a way to handle it technically in the nets, and eventually I think he'll get rid of that problem. If all the little things that he learns in the nets, if he uses that in the middle, he needs to go and keep facing that kind of challenge, and something magical happens. Sometimes during the course of the innings, you find a way of handling the short pitch deliveries. You play 3 or 4 spells where you're really tested by the bowlers, and then you find a way, technical, mental, to overcome that. And one of the things Raina has to do as a batsman is to keep that weight forward. Even if he's insecure, not confident, the weight has to keep going forward, and then find a way of going down, play the pull shot. But if he starts doing that, he's got no hope. And once you've passed that test of bouncers, after a while the fast bowlers also don't like bowling bouncers too much, because it takes a lot out of them. Then they slowly give up, and then slowly that reputation that you have of being weak against the bouncer starts fading away. People start forgetting, because you play 3 or 4 matches in a row where you have handled the short ball well. And then after that, it gets a lot easier, and once you have that confidence that the bouncer is not really an issue, most of your problems are gone.
Getting hit by some blows, I mean that can also be, I mean you can get hit, I mean you need to, and sometimes that can also help you become confident, isn't it? Or is it also the ego issue that people don't want to get hit and they look embarrassed?
Nowadays, in fact, when I got hit, we didn't have a grill on anything, so it was a hit straight on the face. Manoj Prabhakar got hit straight on the mouth, and he against West Indies, but he played the very next test match against New Zealand, opened the innings, and he overcome his problem. But these days, you don't have a problem of getting hit in the face. Getting hit on the face is the worst kind of injury, because then it really, dents your psychology. Getting hit on the fingers and the ribs and all is slightly better. Facial injuries are the tough ones to handle. So I think it's easier for the batsman now. But the only problem that new generation will face, that we faced a lot of bouncers. Growing up, even if we didn't get it to the first class level, it was an important part of our batting that we had to work against, because even before we played first class cricket, there was always the talk about West Indies will come at you, 4 bouncers and over. So the bouncer thing was a huge one even before we played for India. So even in the nets, anywhere possible, we would still be working on that bouncer, because if you have had to play the higher level, you had to face it at some point of time. Youngsters today will not get as much practice as the bouncer, because of the T20 50 overs cricket. So they have to take time out for themselves, even if they are not expected to play test cricket, to keep working on this. The worst thing that can happen is, for a young batsman, is to have a weakness against the bouncer, because then you just lose respect amongst all your peers, and you could have a weakness of the ball coming back in, hitting the pads, but a weakness against the bouncer doesn't look good. And once you have that, people who really judge you, start thinking less of you, which is quite hard to take for any young batsman.
Final question. Sunil Gavaskar was one batsman who did not wear the helmet, but he plays the best of the fast bowlers and short pitch bowling very convincingly and in the best technique possible. Did he ever say anything about how to, or did you pick his brains? Possibly, is there an example you could give about what Gavaskar said to you guys?
I think Gavaskar is a good case to talk about, because Lakshman, Dravid were gifted with, they had the game for the short pitch delivery. Gavaskar didn't have it. Gavaskar was not a hooker, puller, and he faced a lot of it. So I think you have to really, put Gavaskar in a real special category for having handled the bouncer so well right through the number of years that he played. And when bouncer was the stock delivery almost for West Indies. One of the things that he told me, when I was having issues, when I went to him, was that if you have a mental issue, you have to overcome it and become positive. And one way of positively looking at a bouncer is, the moment you see the bouncer, try and get into a position of hooking it or playing an aggressive shot against it, and then leave it. So it was a good advice, and maybe he also did it on occasions. Because once the bouncer is there, if you're telling yourself, it is a mental battle, as I said. If you're telling yourself as a batsman, I'm going to look at this as a scoring opportunity, or I'm going to be positive against it. So the moment I see a bounce, I'm going to actually look to hook it or pull it and score runs of it. Like all young Australian batsmen do. They have an instinct of scoring against a short ball. They see a short ball, they want to score of it. Unlike an Indian who is, when they see the short ball, it's like they are on the defensive. So that was good advice. That get into an aggressive mode, but don't actually pull or hook it, but it will get you into a very good position and a very positive when the weight is going forward. Once this starts happening, I get very worried when I see batsmen starting to do this. Then it's a real tough one to overcome. So that was good advice from Gavaskar.